As a graphic designer, you have to engage viewers and guide them through the information presented to them. When designing for print or web, you need to set up visual clues to let them know where to start reading as they are scanning or scrolling through the pages. We call these entry points, and in this video, I will show you 5 techniques to create eye-catching drop caps, which are the most common entry points used in magazines. The first technique is really simple. All you need is a separate text frame with the first letter of the first paragraph, and then increase the size as big as you want. I'm using Command or Control Shift drag, and then align the text where I want it. Now, you could either place this in a layer behind your text layer. So this will already make the text legible while still having the drop cap behind it. Or if you have it on the same layer, or maybe you have something else in the background, you can also use blending by going into the transparency options for this drop cap frame and then set the blend mode to multiply or overlay or whichever works best. And once again, the whole spread looks like this, and it's completely editable because it's a separate text frame. So this was definitely the easiest technique, but still very commonly used in magazines. Now, the second one we normally refer to as standing capital because we put the drop cap on top of the body of text, and normally it looks good if your drop cap is quite big. So once again, I'm just resizing this text frame. So the first letter is again in a separate text frame, and in this case, I'm trying to align the edges perfectly to those 2 columns behind it, something like that. Now what I'm going to do is to select the paragraph behind it and just simply drag it down so it can really be standing on top of it. So in the previous 2 examples, we already used 2 large letters as entry points. This time it will be so big that it won't even fit on the page. So I'm going to use the same shortcut, Command Shift drag, and increase the size of this letter. I want it to go off the page, but still keep it legible that it is a V. So something like that will work. I'm going to set my text next to it, somewhere around here. And then what I will do is to use the pen tool. And with that, I am going to draw a line around here. So following the line of this letter, let's just do something like that. And then go to the left side. It doesn't really matter what happens here. I'm going to close this up as a shape. And then in normal view, we can see this better. I am going to go to the window menu and choose text wrap. From there, choose the third option, wrap around object shape. And I'm going to come back and increase the offset. But first, I need to fix something. Because I'm using text wrap, both the body copy on the right and that large capital letter on the left are going to be affected by it. And it means that the big letter on the left disappeared. So what we need to do to fix it is to select that text frame and then go to the object menu, choose text frame options and select ignore text wrap. It's as simple as that, and you can see it came back now. So now we can go back and select that shape that we created with the pen tool, but sometimes it can be tricky to select things that are behind other text frames. So for this, just use Command or Control click. That way I can select what's behind. And now that it's selected, I can add the offset that I wanted to use and set it up to something around this. Now let's take a closer look at this. If I press W, I can go back to normal view, and I think it looks quite nice. There's 2 more techniques I'm going to show you in this tutorial, but now we will start combining Photoshop and InDesign, and I would love to know which of these techniques was your favorite, and if you're inspired to create something based on these techniques that I'm showing you and you're sharing it, please use the hashtag #YesI'mADesigner so we can feature your work on our channels. Here we are in Photoshop, and this example might be familiar to those who watched our 365 Days of Creativity series. If you missed out, you can find the link in the description below. Essentially, this is a simple letter with clipping mask used on it. So we have an image that's clipped onto this text in Photoshop. The text itself has also an inner shadow that creates that little bit of depth around it, as you can see it. And then the same image is duplicated and then with a layer mask showing only a couple of details around the edges. So those little leaves coming out around the edges is basically what you see thanks to this layer. So if I just turn that on and have all the others off, this is how it looks. And the whole image would look like this. If I shift click on the layer mask, we can also see that. So it's a simple technique, and all we have to do is to save this as a Photoshop file without the background. So keep the background transparent and then place that file into InDesign. So here we are back in InDesign, and what I'm going to do is to select that image frame and I'm going to cut it out. That's Edit, Cut, or Control or Command X, and then double click in the text frame where the body copy is, put the cursor at the beginning of the text frame, and then use Command or Control V to paste it into the text frame. This way, the image becomes an actual character within the text. It's also called inset or inline text. And the cool thing about it is that when I'm changing my text frame, this is going to move around with the text. But the best thing about it is that we can also use the actual drop cap feature for it. So if I double click on the first paragraph, I can go to the paragraph settings and increase the number of lines for the drop cap, and you will see how it's going to start syncing into the first paragraph. So I can set it up to something like that, maybe move it down a bit. And then if I zoom closer, I can do a few more adjustments with this. I can double click inside the text frame and highlight that first character. And once it's highlighted like a word or a letter, you can use the Alt or Option Shift up and down arrows for the baseline shift feature. With this, you can refine its vertical position, and I think that looks quite good. And also, if you need, you can keep your cursor flashing there next to the drop cap. You can use Alt or Option left and right arrows to change the kerning or the spacing between the drop cap and the rest of the body copy. So it might look similar to the previous technique where we use text wrap, but here remember, because it's an inset image, it's going to move around with the text frame. So for example, if I put another paragraph in front of it, it's going to push it down, like with normal text. So I really like this technique, and definitely worth giving it a go if you have a cool image that you can use as the first letter of a paragraph. And I kept the coolest technique for last. Once again, we start in Photoshop and then we will continue in InDesign. Before we continue, I just wanted to let you know about our creative membership program. For a small monthly fee, you get access to over 200 hours of Adobe certified online training courses. Master all the tools and skills needed to become a professional graphic designer or illustrator. As a pro member, you will get mentoring from me and my team, access to webinars, student forum, and creative briefs to help you build an outstanding portfolio. Pro members can also download the project files for all of our YouTube tutorials. Sign up at yesimadesigner.com/memberships and start your free trial today. And now let's head back to the tutorial. So I have an awesome photo from the series Vikings, and this character in the series was called Porun. I'm going to select her by using the Select Subject feature, which does a very quick selection using Adobe Sensei, the artificial intelligence selection. So it's a really cool selection already. We can turn this into a mask by clicking on the Japanese flag on the bottom right, and then double click on the mask icon, which will open the Select and Mask work area. And within there, let's select the Refine Edge brush tool. Shortcut is R. And let's just zoom a little bit closer and paint over all of this fur detail. So it's a brilliant tool to get these details back, and also maybe refine the hair here on the right side and there. I think that looks quite nice. Also here we get that gap. And I think that's all good. That's all we needed. So we can click on OK. Now we can refine the mask a little bit further by Alt or Option clicking on the thumbnail for the mask. And then if you select the Burn tool and set the range to shadows, you can very quickly eliminate any halo around the edges that was created with the Refine Edge. And then similarly to that, if you select the Dodge tool and set the range to highlights, and start painting around the edges, you can make sure that there are no transparent details, especially around the hair. If that's still not enough and you feel like this should be white, just use the brush tool and paint over with white. So something like that. Let's just see how this looks. If I Alt or Option click back on the mask, I think that looks quite nice. All right, so now it's time to combine the photo and the text and make it look like the character is coming out of this letter. So in a way, the text is going to be like a holding device. So let's just select the image and place it on top of the text first of all. The text layer I'm going to set to 100% opacity. And what we will do is to add another mask on this layer by creating a group for it. That's Command or Control G. And on that group, I will add the mask. I like to keep my mask separate. So the first one was just simply for isolating it from the background. The second one is specifically to align it with the composition. So I'm going to use the brush tool and I'm just going to very quickly brush over these details here, which I definitely don't want to see. Something like that. And then I'm going to create a quick selection of my text layer by Command or Control clicking on the thumbnail of the text layer. This way I can delete those details that overlap the text. So something like this, and go around here, probably hide these details as well. Okay. All I need is to show the hand on the left side and also here on the right side to create an interesting overlap or depth effect. So now I can use Command or Control D to deselect this, zoom a little bit closer, and then using the same mask that I used before, I am going to switch to white by pressing X on the keyboard and just very quickly paint over the hand. Yeah, something like that. And all I have to do now is to refine this selection. I normally would create a path as well with the pen tool and then draw around that. But here on this side, I'm just going to use the brush tool and just very quickly paint over it. So something like that. I'm not spending too much time refining it because you will get the idea. So I think that looks quite nice. So without the masking, obviously it was like this. And with that additional mask, now it looks like that. But we need to fix the other arm here. So once again, I'm going to use the brush tool, switch to white by pressing X and reveal the hand. Okay, so there's the hand. And then the fur probably can also come out of bounds and be somewhere around there. I think that will work quite nicely. And see, that's why it's good to have two separate masks, because when I reveal these details, I'm not revealing the original background. I am only revealing the already masked out details. So now that we have this selection, again, we can refine it. And this time I'm going to use the pen tool just to be a bit more precise. Set to path mode, I am going to start drawing the selection here and zoom a little bit closer so we can see what I'm doing. Essentially, I'm just drawing around these details very quickly. And then let's move down. I'm creating curves and holding down spacebar, you can reposition your anchor points. So you can see how quickly and effectively we can make this selection. Something like that. Okay, again, I'm not doing a perfect job because I'm trying to show you this very quickly, but hopefully you get the idea how it works. So here we have this one more detail, and then it can be a little bit more faster on these details. No one will notice how it was originally. Okay, something like that. I think that works nicely. And then we just have to make a big selection around this and then press Command or Control Return or Enter, which will turn this into a selection. And all the details inside this needs to be kept, but all the details outside of it can be hidden. So we will invert the selection by pressing Command or Control Shift I. And then using black as our foreground color, we can very quickly paint over all of these details that we don't need. Then Command or Control D to deselect and then zoom closer, just fixing a few more things here. I think this can be hidden away, make that edge a little bit more believable, and also around here. I think something like that tidies it up nicely. Okay, so let's zoom out and take a look. I think it looks quite nice. That was before and after. And once again, like before, I'm going to save this as a Photoshop file without the background. So keep the background completely transparent. And then let's place this into our InDesign composition. Here it is, and it already looks badass, but what I'm going to do is to increase the size a bit, and we can combine the techniques we've learned. So we can also use the text wrap, probably around here. If we go to Window, Text Wrap, and then turn on the same feature we used before. And in this case, because it's a Photoshop file, we have to also make sure it uses the alpha channel, which is based on the masks that we created. And then let's not forget about the offset, which we used before as well, something like that. So let's take a look at this in full screen. I think that looks awesome. Maybe one last thing that I would add is a drop shadow on the letter. So if you are in InDesign and you want to go back and make changes to your Photoshop composition, you can just hold down the Alt or Option key and double click on it. That goes back into Photoshop. And there, what we can do is to add an additional layer above the text, clip it onto it by holding down again Alt or Option and click. That creates the clipping mask, and then use the brush tool and maybe select the same color that you used on the text, but set the blend mode of this layer to multiply. And that way, when you are drawing with a soft big brush and probably a low opacity like 20%, you can start building up a nice shadow. So here around this part, I'm going to make it darker, maybe even reduce the brightness of the color. So adding a little bit more shading there, and the same thing here on this side. I'm just building up this effect nicely, something like that. Here I'm going to make it even darker, and by the way, I'm using the HUD color picker shortcut. That's Command, Control, Option, click and drag on Mac, and I think it's Alt, Shift, right click on PC, but I'm not 100% sure about the PC version. So it's called HUD color display shortcut. So there it is. I'm going to reduce it even more in that corner. Okay, so now let's save these changes, Command or Control S, and go back into InDesign, and we can see our shadows are showing up nicely here as well. So once again, here are the 5 examples where we created these creative drop caps and entry points for our magazine spreads. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget to give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more tutorials like this in the future. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and share this video if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever we release new videos. Click on the link on my right and start your membership today to get access to over 200 hours of training courses and personal mentoring by me and my team of creative professionals. Have fun learning, guys, and I will see you in the next one.